Welcome to Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy. With Shang-Chi coming out and reinventing the Mandarin, I revisited Iron Man 3. And you know, a lot of people don't like this movie, which is crazy, because it's great for the following reasons. It's the MCU's first auteur movie. This thing was written and directed by Shane Black, the guy who gave us all of these movies, and it has his style written all over it.
Crazy, huh? Yeah.
Buddy cop team-up, Christmas, narration, great action, one-liners.
You walked right into this one. I've dated hotter chicks than you.
The movie also strips Tony down, makes him face the trauma of the Battle of New York, takes away his home, his armor, his support network.
Jarvis?
And makes him confront his trauma by relearning who he is.
You're a mechanic, right?
Right.
This all contributes to the thematic device of Tony becoming more machine than man.
And my suits, they're
Machines.
part of me.
Which establishes his Iron Man addiction that continues throughout his entire arc.
I'm glad you brought this up because it's nothing. It's just a housing unit for nanoparticles.
You're not helping.
No,
your
this is
case,
detachable.
okay?
It's not a...
You don't need that.
The banter with him and Harley is great.
Dad went to 7-Eleven to get scratchers. I guess he won because that was 6 years ago.
Which happens, dads leave. No need to be a pussy about it. Here's what I need.
And sets up that later he'll become a father himself.
Please don't tell me there's a 12-year-old kid waiting in the car that I've never met.
And the movie weaves into the Infinity Saga with no clunky connections. For instance, how it establishes his lack of sleep.
Sir, may I remind you that you've been awake for nearly 72 hours?
It's the last time you got a good night's sleep.
Einstein slept 3 hours a year.
You can rest now.
I think we can all agree that these are all terrific points. What most people don't like, according to our community page, is the Mandarin.
You'll never see me coming. I wouldn't go in there for 20 minutes.
But with the benefit of hindsight, the Mandarin is the most clever part of the movie. And more than that, the Mandarin was right about the way wars are fought and conducted in a post-9/11 national security state. Not about terrorism, he was wrong about that. So, first let's talk about the real Mandarin, Aldrich Killian. When we first meet him, he's just another Tony Stark superfan. Then, Tony stood him up on the roof, giving Killian what he later called
The greatest gift that anybody's ever given me. Desperation.
This was Killian's rock bottom, when he realized that he would never be taken seriously because people were too obsessed with image. This revelation led him to create the Mandarin and then to recreate himself. So he began to style himself after Tony Stark, a handsome playboy with the #1 arms dealing contract in the world. The movie also shows this reflected by another of Tony's superfans.
Pattern my whole look after you.
Back to that guy a little later. The reason Tony Stark was such a successful arms dealer is because America has always had an enemy, a boogeyman in the closet. Tony was always able to leverage our fear of the enemy into profits.
They say the best weapon is one you never have to fire. I respectfully disagree. I prefer the weapon you only have to fire once. That's how Dad did it. That's how America does it. And it's worked out pretty well so far.
Ironically, years later, Tony's own fear of a boogeyman will cause him to manufacture
A suit of armor around the world.
So, Killian's moment on the roof when he had to face his own fears made him want to control the fears of others. So he decides to create fears of his own using Hollywood techniques. He's basically Mysterio.
Ever since that big dude with the hammer fell out of the sky, subtlety's kind of had its day.
People need to believe, and nowadays, they'll believe anything.
But Black uses this simple goal to create a commentary on how the American media turned war into entertainment, complete with personal stories, villains, and heroic presidents. Killian is creating a villain that is the other, a vague threat that hates America. Someone we don't have to understand, we just have to fear and hate them. He's taking advantage of our ignorance of other cultures.
Yes, you're free. If you weren't before.
And later he quotes his father,
Failure is the fog through which we glimpse triumph.
which sounds like a fortune cookie, but actually reveals his plan, to use a fog of war, of fear, to accomplish his goals. But to really understand the Mandarin twist, we have to look at the history of America. We won our independence with a war that had to be sold to colonial citizens with documents like the Declaration of Independence and banners reading "Don't Tread on Me." From then on, our history is dotted with armed conflicts and the slogans that we used to sell them. Remember the Alamo, remember the Maine.
54-40 a fight. What does that mean?
It's a slogan. It's from the...
Remember the Maine.
Yeah,
That's gotta be from...
Tippecanoe and Tyler, too.
No, that's not the...
They're war slogans, Mr. Morse. We remember the slogans, we can't even remember the wars.
But following the Civil War, Americans had a distaste for battle. The country began to value its role as the world's pacifist and kept a standing army so small that they had a hard time stopping the Mexican bandit Pancho Villa. This is why, in World War II, the government unleashed a full-blown PR campaign to continuously sell the war. War bond rallies, posters, music, films, all to make sure the public's approval of the fighting didn't wane when the bodies started to come home. But Hollywood didn't stop selling the war after it ended. The 40s and 50s saw an eruption of war-related media. Every aspect of the war was retold and commercialized to become a product. There were also war sitcoms, war toys, and most importantly, war comics. Then later, post-Vietnam, stories about that war were mostly haunted, heartfelt dramas.
There's pieces of them all over me, just like this, and I'm trying to pull them off, you know, and it's my friend that's all over me.
Vietnam vets were mostly painted as wounded warriors, not heroes. But then came the biggest commercial extravaganza of the 1990s. The Gulf War, Operation Desert Storm. Desert Storm was a real conflict that killed more than 100,000 people, but it was still packaged and sold as a product. Desert Storm toys, trading cards, and video games. In fact, the Super Nintendo game Desert Strike's main villain was a Saddam Hussein lookalike simply called the Madman. CNN actually rose to prominence with its 24-hour coverage of the war.
Smart bomb falling down a chimney. 2,500 missions a day, 100 days. One video of one bomb, Mr. Morse. The American people bought that war.
And then we did the same thing after 9/11. I still have my Operation Enduring Freedom trading cards, and the media perfected its formula in the Second Iraq War. Talk about the villain, find a human interest story, show the bad guy falling. And I'm not saying all this to be anti-military or anti-American. We have fought in many justified wars and done a lot of good around the world. I'm proud of our military and especially our vets. I'm just saying that there is a formula that the American media uses to prosecute wars and sell them to the people.
When my country is at war, I want my country to win. There is an inherent bias in the coverage of the American press in general.
After the public relations failures of the Vietnam War, the Pentagon invested heavily in media relations. Each branch of the military has a Hollywood liaison, and the military cooperates with films that present them in a favorable light, like Top Gun, Captain Marvel, and all 3 Iron Man films. So the deep irony of this movie is that the military signed off on Shane Black's film that condemns the media military industrial complex. So I'm telling you all this so you'll understand the context for Killian's plan. He can't sell arms without an enemy. Obadiah Stane literally funded terrorists to stoke competition with the USA. And Killian actually chose a more humanitarian route. Rather than fund an actual terrorist, he created one of his own. And that terrorist attracts followers with well-edited propaganda videos. And this is the flip side to the American media's ability to sell war. Terrorist groups like ISIS have actually gotten very good at creating slick recruitment videos. But it's also telling that Killian executed his plan on the backs of American military veterans. Don't even get me started on America's history with screwing over its vets. Vets have had their pensions withheld, health benefits delayed indefinitely, don't get mental health treatment that they need, and are left on the streets. Vietnam vets were stigmatized as losers and baby killers. It all just makes me sick.
And I see all those maggots at the airport protesting me, spitting, calling me a baby killer and all kinds of vile crap.
And we see a similar treatment in Iron Man 3. Killian is turning vets into living weapons, essentially what the government trains soldiers to become, and what Tony is trying to turn himself into.
They're part of me.
The trauma veterans go through is often hidden, tucked away from the cameras. The people of Rose Hill assumed that this explosion was caused by a crazy vet who was a suicide bomber, and they condemn him in the afterlife.
People said these shadows are like the marked souls going to heaven. Except the bomb guy. He went to hell and he didn't get a shadow.
The sad truth is, a vet dying without a trace is a story that's all too real in this country. And Tony, in a lot of ways, is another vet who's dealing with his own PTSD and can't adjust to being home. Because here's the thing, Screen Crush. Tony didn't change that much in Iron Man 1 and 2. His ego was still huge, and he relished in his celebrity status. And he's essentially the same person at the end of Iron Man 2. Tony begins the series as a key part of the military-industrial complex, and in Iron Man 3, he still is. He's built a suit for military personnel to use, and Rhodey deliberately shuts him out of a mission.
It's not superhero business.
No, it's not, quite frankly.
So let's talk about the rebranding of War Machine, because it also contributed to the movie's theme. In the comics, Rhodey is the hero War Machine, but this was changed in Iron Man 3. Why? Because it was harder to sell that name to the public.
War Machine was a little too aggressive, all right? This sends a better message.
Just like the Don't Tread on Me flag and the Desert Storm toys, the government needed an Iron Man of its own that it could sell to the public, hence the Iron Patriot, a walking example of the military rebranding itself for public consumption.
It tested well with focus groups, all right?
I am Iron Patriot.
Listen.
Tony, at the start of the movie, is still okay with making a weapon of war, as long as he remains in control of it. He's still obsessed with his own image, posturing to look like a badass.
My name is Tony Stark, and I'm not afraid of you. I know you're a coward.
Aldrich Killian is the end result of Tony's natural progression. He's used technology to make himself fit and handsome in the model of Tony Stark. Just like Tony, he uses his superhuman abilities to feel better about himself. Iron Man has always been a way for Tony to alleviate his own guilt.
Effective immediately, I am shutting down the weapons manufacturer division of Stark International.
Killian has no guilt, so he uses extremists to make himself healthy and powerful. In other words, in Iron Man, Tony stopped building killing machines for money and instead invented a single killing machine for his own pleasure. Now, I do think that Age of Ultron, Civil War, and Infinity War made Tony into a more selfless human being, but this isn't where he is in Iron Man 3. Killian is the perfect mirror for Tony Stark. Stain was the embodiment of his warmongering, Venko was about the sins of his father, Justin Hammer is Tony's obsession with celebrity, but Killian shows how Tony manipulated the military-industrial complex even after he became Iron Man. Killian represents the many sins of the system. A huge chunk of our federal budget goes toward the military, a lot of it justified. However, huge amounts of it are waste. They fund weapons and projects that even the military brass have said that they don't want or need. Why does this happen? Because weapons manufacturers lobby Congress, and some of those planes and tanks are built in America, providing jobs in the congressman's home districts, which gets them elected, and so they dump trillions of dollars into the military to buy weapons that are never deployed in the field. By Americans, at least. That is the military-industrial complex, and this isn't some pie-in-the-sky liberal thought. This one comes from Dwight Eisenhower.
We have been compelled to create a permanent armaments industry of vast proportions.
And that's the genius of Iron Man 3. It makes Tony face a villain who's able to manipulate the very system that has empowered Tony for his entire life. And Killian does not manipulate the system by building a better gun, he uses the media. The Mandarin's only superpower is the ability to take over the airwaves, to control what we see, and by extension, what we think. For instance, Tony learns about the attack on his house from the TV. The bombing that hurts Happy and draws Tony into the fight is at a movie theater, all foreshadowing that the boogeyman terrorist is an illusion. He's able to track down the Mandarin using the signal in a TV truck. And by the way, after Tony's detached from his things and he has to step away from his celebrity to stay in hiding, Shane Black does a great job of showing how silly celebrity is with this guy.
Pattern my whole look after you.
But actually, this guy isn't trying to emulate Tony, he's trying to copy a facsimile of Tony that he made himself.
I had them do it off a doll that I made, so it's not like it's off a picture.
Now that's funny, but the doll is how this guy sees Tony Stark, the same way the Mandarin is how the media sees people in the Middle East. In both cases, our views have been shaped by what we see on TV, and we usually don't know anything about the lives of the real people.
Yes, you're free. If you weren't before.
So all this is the reason that I think Trevor is such a brilliant character.
Ready for another lesson? Blah, blah, blah.
He's lowbrow, as shown by his introductory sound. He's low status, he slouches, he clowns, he even repeats everything that people say like a parrot.
Killian,
Killian.
he created you.
He created me.
Because Trevor is an empty person, merely a vessel for a greater truth, that Tony and us are all being manipulated. In this case, Trevor represents television itself. It's neither good nor bad, it's just a medium that people can use for good or evil purposes. See, Tony's journey throughout the movie is the counterpoint to Killian's scheme. Tony begins the movie with macho bravado while he's actually slipping out of control. To undercut his masculinity, the armor even nails him in the crotch. Happy is also trying to prove his manhood.
You know what happened when I told people I was Iron Man's bodyguard? They would laugh in my face.
And Tony's attempt at go it alone unilateral force backfires immediately.
10-8-80 Malibu Point, 90265. I'll leave the door unlocked.
You could even read all this as Shane Black saying that Tony represents the American military male storming into battle on a moment's notice, but he needs to step back, learn about his enemy, study him, and then take away his most important weapon, the ability to control people's fears. Tony needed to be humbled, to let go of the armor and the military-industrial complex that he tied his life to. His armor, representing macho brute force, becomes his enemy. It attacks him in the very first scene, and then it attacks Pepper, the strong woman in his life. But like any addict, Tony can't let the armor go.
And my suits, they're But they're part of me.
Again, there's a counterpoint here in Killian.
Hi.
Whose abilities have literally become a part of himself. So the movie is actually about Tony learning that he is his own worst supervillain. His carelessness hurt everyone in his life, and he needed a clean break.
The clean slate protocol, sir?
Screwed, it's Christmas. Yes. Yes.
Now, I'm not saying that what Killian did was right, but he nailed us to a T. He understands that images are more important than actual ideas.
I just needed a reason to kill you that would play well on TV.
Or in my case, thumbnails are more important than actual videos. When he takes over the Iron Patriot armor, it's a way of saying that he now controls the front-facing image of the war on terror.
I'll have the West's most powerful leader in one hand, and the world's most feared terrorist in the other.
The first movie was about breaking away from the military-industrial complex. This movie is about condemning its existence. Unlike Obadiah Stane, Killian isn't what Tony would have become. He represents the fear and paranoia that Tony profited from to become wealthy. For Tony to move forward, he has to expose the true Mandarin to the public. He's not a shady terrorist who spouts vague platitudes with great branding. No, the Mandarin's real power is his ability to make us afraid. Tony wins by conquering his own fears and exposing the big lie of the Mandarin, a big lie that actually exploited a dark truth inside us all. Deep down, we all love Iron Man 3. But that's just my thoughts. Let me know yours down in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.